reappointment of Stephen Bright as our auditor. I have the script. Do you want me to read it? Okay. This is from Stephen Bright, who, as I said, has audited our accounts now for 13 years. It is a precondition to my reappointment that I am perceived and remain independent of the Trust. While I would be pleased to accept reappointment for the following year, I am required therefore to draw your attention to any perceived threats to my independence. Long association with the client and the familiarity it brings is regarded as such a threat by my professional supervisory bodies in cases where an audit appointment has been for a period of 10 years or more. As this will be my 13th year of my appointment, it needs to be considered as a potential threat by myself, the board and the membership as part of the reappointment process. As the constitution of the board evolves and is constantly changing, I consider that this threat to my independence is substantially reduced to an acceptable level. However, the membership also needs to consider this matter and only confirm my reappointment if they consider I remain independent and that no threats through long-term association or otherwise operate to affect this. And I'm working on the basis you're happy to be Okay, so subject to that, that note, if anyone has, perhaps I'll hear if anyone has got any issues regarding the independence of Stephen Bright. Otherwise, I'm looking for someone to propose his reappointment as auditor, please. That's Nigel, the seconder. Roger, thank you very much. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Excellent, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to the election. I said in my chairman's I thought that I was pleased to have a contested election this year. I think it's healthy for the Trust. It shows us as the democratic organisation that we are. It makes the debate more vibrant. I was pleased that we had so many candidates standing. I thought to have 12 standing was positive. I've been through the election process myself. I know it's difficult. You really put yourself in the spotlight. And I have the utmost respect for all the candidates that have stood. To those who are successful, I wish them all the best. For those who aren't, I will say this, that some of the most committed and talented Trust Board members I've worked with over the last 5 years are those who in fact weren't elected when they first stood to the Trust board. So democracy is a wonderful thing, it's not without its flaws. So on that note, John Street, please. Again, I'm grateful to John as acting as returning officer and overseeing the election process. It's all yours, John.
Thank you very much. Good morning all, and as the duly appointed returning officer for the elections, I hereby declare the number of votes cast in favour of each candidate as follows. Mark Cordell, 210, Sean Devine, 431, Paul Farley, 472, Terry Hall, 326, Clive Harrison, 373, Peter Holding, 381, Neil Lemelier, 420, Paul Lethbridge, 156, Clive Matthews, 273, Matthew Phillips, 404, Bill Pullman, 357, Martin Weiler, 448. I therefore declare that Sean Devine, Paul Farley, Clive Harrison, Peter Holding, Neil Lemelier, Matthew Phillips and Martin Weiler are duly elected as trustees. There were a total of 754 ballot papers returned, of which I rejected 9. 4 of the voter could be identified, 2 as more votes have been cast than were available, and 3 which were returned after the closing date. This represented a thumping 25.42% turnout of the eligible electorate, much up on last time. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Well done to those who were completely elected. If all the candidates please want to stay until afterwards and I'll have a chat. Every time there's a contested election, I say to John Street that my hope is that we increase the turnout of the Peace and Crime Commission vote. And again, we have done that. This year, I rather hopefully said I wanted to get to the turnout of the vote on Brexit, but I think we've fell short of that. But I am pleased that over a quarter of the membership voting, I think, is actually healthy and positive. I should say that there will be a meeting on, I think, November the 3rd, at which John Street will attend, as well as some others, just to review the election process, as we're obliged to do after every contested election. I know there's a resolution on that later, but it's a process that we will keep under review, and I hope that we have a contested election again next year. Okay, resolutions. And I thank the members who submitted the resolutions for today's meeting. There are 3. The position is that each resolution includes more than one proposal, but they were submitted as singular resolutions, so they stand or fall as one. I'm not going to split the vote in regard to where they've been divided up. There have been a fairly large amount of proxies submitted. It is likely, the position regarding taking into account proxy votes is that I, at my discretion, can call the proxy votes, or 10% of those attending the meeting, and the likelihood is that I'm going to take into account the proxy votes. I'll take a show of hands first. Can I start, please, with the resolution put by Bill Pullman in regard to the election process? Bill, do you want me to read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. The resolution reads, we propose that Exeter City Supporters Trust rules on campaigning for candidates for election to the Trust Board be changed to A. Allow candidates to engage with the membership for the purposes of election campaigning using any social media or online platform, provided that they inform the Trust Secretary and Returning Officer of their intention to do so, and name all platforms or forums they intend to use. B. Allow candidates to produce at their own cost literature in support of their candidacy, provided that a copy of any such literature is supplied in hard copy or electronically to the Trust Secretary and Returning Officer prior to its distribution to members. Bill, did you want to speak to that motion?
Yeah, please. Don't turn me back.
Yeah.
Basically, throughout the election process, at present, online campaigning is restricted to Trust-approved platforms, which are basically Trust Facebook page, Twitter, and it says the Trust website, although there's no real interactive facility on that. I found it almost impossible to engage with members while I've been trying to campaign. People have asked questions on various platforms, like the X-Web. I'd love to have responded, but the rules currently prevent me from doing so. I think if we want to get more people involved and more people engaged with the Trust as a whole, we need a platform where people can discuss and directly question all the candidates on any of the issues and give them a chance to respond. Just an example, at the recent Hustings event, there was a question asked by a member. All of us, pretty much, all 12 of us, I think, pretty much answered it in the same way. It turned out from a comment he made on X-Web that wasn't what he was getting at at all. Now, I mean, maybe because we all answered the same way, that's what he wanted to be, but the point is he needs to be able to explain that, and we need to be able to respond in the way the question was asked. So that's basically it.
Thank you, Bill. Bill, what about in regard to the second part of the proposals, the candidates produce at their own cost literature and support? There's perhaps an argument to say that favours those who have the deepest pockets.
Yeah, I understand. I take the point you're making. Let's face it, nobody's going to be producing a four-colour brochure in support of their candidacy. We're not talking about national election, we're talking about elections.
That's not what it says.
No, it isn't what it says. Absolutely. The point was, all I wanted to be able to do was photocopy a few things with the basic points of why I was standing, just so I can pass it around to people who may not engage with any of the other platforms. You know, there's Some people don't use social media whatsoever. Some people are vehemently opposed to XWeb and other platforms. I think all I want to do is be able to go, right, I'm standing, this is what I want to achieve, this is what, this may be what problems I see we need to address. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure I could print everything I wanted off for about a tenner. I think if you're going to stand for the trust, you're going to have to expect you to spend a lot more than that as a time as a trustee. Yeah, I think most people can probably afford enough to afford that, and it could be that's an issue. But personally, I think you could produce sufficient literature to do that.
What I would say is, regardless of how the vote goes, I'd like to invite you to the meeting on the 3rd of November when we discuss the election policy. I think that would be valuable. Anyone else want to speak in favour of the motion?
Yeah, I'm 27 years old. Pretty much everyone I know has no interest in this, and I think this is exactly the reason why nobody knows. People don't know that's happening. People my age certainly don't know it's happening. They aren't going on the Trust website. They're not going to go on the Trust Facebook page. If you want to engage, the Trust has a decision. I think there's a problem with two. But I think you guys all have a decision to make. Do you want young people involved? If you do, you need to change this rule. Simple as that.
Any other views?
Well, is this necessarily one motion?
Well, it was.
It could be read as two motions.
It could be, but the difficulty is that the proxy votes have been registered on the basis that it is a single vote. I think that's the problem I've got. Martin?
I think probably most of us here have got a lot of sympathy with this, but have some problems with the wording and some problems that maybe need thinking through more about the cost and quality of access to this. I just wondered if Bill would be happy to withdraw the motion, but with the commitment of the new trust board, we'll look at this and develop a policy. I'm just nervous about the wording.
I personally, I wouldn't actually, because I found it completely debilitating. Trying to, I wanted to answer questions that were being directly put forward on certain platforms.
I don't think that's the bit that
I
we're arguing with.
the literature, I think it's, for me, I think that's perhaps been built beyond what any problem it is. Yes, as I said, no one's going to be producing a full colour brochure. We're not talking about something. But if they do, they do, really. But does that make it more powerful?
Okay.
Personally, I don't think it
My suggestion would have been, well, be fully discussed. If it was voted on and it was voted against, then it still could be brought up in discussion by the trust to see whether a different way around wording it. But that's the only reason why we shouldn't be voting on it.
Nigel first, I'll go to you, and I've got two at the back. Nigel?
Well, I'm just going to say what I think other people have just been saying, which is that as it's a bit of a composite motion, and one has to say about part B, but I think it's something that has merit that ought to be considered in the round.
Yeah, I have worried on the level playing field aspect on both counts. First of all, I want to say that the younger elements are very pro social media, etc. But quite a lot of probably and the older members aren't. And it could be nothing to stop the hustings to be spread through the social media so that you could put all what you wanted to say on your hustings in line with the rules. I expect there's a maximum wordage or whatever, and then post that on social media. And the second part, again, as is alluded to, level playing field with financial clout will also be a factor for me.
I think there were two hands, but I think I saw Neil and Bernadette maybe Damien, is it?
Yeah, thanks.
I'll go Neil at first.
Okay, just a couple of points on this. Speaking as someone who acts as a returning officer in many trust elections, the reason for this rule in the first place is because of the difficulties of monitoring canvassing that goes on. So whilst I appreciate that this motion tries to cover that by telling the Trust Secretary and Returning Officer where these things are being posted, the issue is, does the Returning Officer and the Trust Secretary have the time to monitor all the different platforms that it can be done on? Certainly I, as a Returning Officer for many other trusts, done. It's not something I can spend every day monitoring all the discussions and all the emails. There are so many social media platforms out there that it would be incredibly difficult to monitor them to make sure nothing is being said that shouldn't be. So I find that as one big issue. I would also come back on what Bill said about there being a web platform for discussion on the Trust website. We provided exactly that 5-6 years ago as part of XWeb, and no one used it. It was there, it was social media, it was ready to use. The main problem was that people didn't want to be identifiable when they asked their questions.
Bernadette, did you have your hand?
Yeah, just to reiterate really what Neil's just said and what Nigel said, I think I support this in principle, but we vote against it based on the actual wording, particularly at their own cost. So just to agree with what's been said already, really.
To me, is this perfect? Possibly not. Does it move us forward and put us in a better place than we are now? Yes. A much bigger concern to me than the question of the level playing field. Like Bill said, I appreciate the concerns. I don't think that's really an issue. For me, much more of an issue, and this will go some way to addressing that, this trust election and every trust election previously, to my view, and this might be my personal take, the people whose names are known around the club are the people who get elected, and everybody else has less of a chance. This goes a long way to addressing that, and I think that's much more important than any minor concerns about the second round election.
I'm going to ask John Asprey.
Yeah, I've got similar concerns, but also similar interests as well, obviously. Having seen this year's elections and the turnout increasing, that's obviously better than it was 2 years ago. The last time we had a contested election, I believe. Like Neil, I have got some concerns about the role of the returning officer in all of this. We are not there to guide, we're not there to edit, as the second element there indicates it may well be, the literature that is going to be there. We are there to make sure that the election is running in accordance with the rules. And that is my concern, that I would not have the ability, and what I would say as a returning officer, or whether it's literature or not, is not something that I do in my professional role as a returning officer. I get involved when other people complain about the results and the way that people are conducting themselves in the election. I similarly have some concerns, but I obviously see what you say as well about the cost element. There needs to be a fair element. Even in local elections, there is a level playing field for the amount of money that can be spent on election, and it can be much less than you think it probably is. Although there is still great disparity in the amount of money that is spent. Those who have money and those who don't, or those who stand as independents. We have already committed ourselves to look at the way the election is conducted, has been conducted in this time, and I will say that this election has been, in some ways, the most testing that I've been involved in with the trust elections, because of the number of questions and issues that have been raised, some of these concerning this issues here, which is why we have decided to have the very detailed consideration of those issues at a meeting in a couple of weeks' time, which the Chairman's already invited you to come along to the bill. I think that will give the opportunity, if this motion is lost today, for it to be not lost completely. It will still be there for consideration in the future time. But from a semi-professional capacity, because obviously in this role I'm here as a volunteer, returning officer, I will vote against it, but only for those particular reasons.
If I could just say, people may not be aware why I put at their own cost. My reading of the rules is that we're currently banned from producing anything, any kind of literature, which again seems to me really very restrictive. That's why it says at their own cost, because currently the rules say we can't. We're not allowed to spend any money on it. I do think it's right that this trust should have to fork out for whatever literature. That was why the point was.
So my issue with that is it should then say at a limit to be decided by. So if it was £10, £25,
I did consider that in, and then
I'd feel a lot happier. But I agree with Damien again. I think this takes us absolutely in the right direction, but I just probably can't vote in favour at this point.
Okay, fine. I've got you haven't spoken, so
Now,
next.
can I just raise that it says about putting these things to the trust board, but it doesn't say what the trust board can do. It doesn't say it can pass judgment on it. It just says as long as you put it to the trust board, then it's acceptable, basically.
And finally,
Yeah, well,
I'm
it's a
sorry, I will come to you and then the vote, yeah.
Just a similar point to that. From my reading of this, and feel free to correct me in terms of rules if you want, but there isn't because there isn't a specified amount. What is to stop the trust board when this is dealt with making that amount £20? I mean, I entirely understand the objections to two, but that it's like a debating point. In practice, who do we think is going to go and spend thousands of pounds to alter the results of selection? Who do you think that is going to be? Surely nobody can object to somebody printing some leaflets, spending £10, £15, and I mean.
You made the point. I'm going to take final comment here, and then I'm going to move.
I think the point I was going to make was very similar to that. I'm wondering if the membership here would be able to now make a change to that resolution that would be acceptable to Bill that we could vote on, because that seems to be the one contentious point. Those words at their own cost, and if some minor change could be made to that, that would actually be acceptable to more people.
I don't think we have time to vote on an amendment first. I think we could end up going maybe. So I'll take the vote.
Chair, point of order, you're not allowed to make amendments at this meeting.
Okay, I'm going to move. I'm going to see where the consensus lies. Try and avoid taking every single vote. But if we have to, we will. And if we need to, we'll then take the proxies. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour of Bill's resolution, please? Now, working on the basis that that is a majority of those in the room, unless anyone wants to go for count.
I think you should
No. You should. No. You can. You should go for count. Okay, all those in favour, and if someone can do the accounting. Okay. 32 in favour. All those against?
James judgments.
Yeah.